This team is locked in. And I understand, you know, there's luxury penalties that we're going to have to pay. So what? If we have to lose a draft pick or something,
also, like, what if Jeff Bezos becomes the owner? Can
Exactly.
we just mention that? Like,
exactly. It's a little weird feeling.
Weird.
But,
like, he wouldn't be present as an owner, but also we wouldn't have to worry about cap casualties
I did like how Wick was present a lot of the times. Every time I went to a Celtics game, I'd actually see him, which were very interesting. But, I mean, overall, just the fact that we have locked down this core, beyond the core team, beyond the core starting five, I mean, the bench, too. Like, we have set ourselves up perfectly for a dynasty. And I understand that there's no guarantee with it. Obviously, other teams have gotten better, like the Knicks, and the Bucks are, you know, they're going to be healthy again. But I really like what we've done here.
Yeah, and the last thought about this is that while other teams, maybe they're switching stuff around, we stayed the same, which means we didn't get any worse. Arguably, we're just going to get better because Tatum's only 26, Brown's only 27. These guys are not in their primes yet. They're just starting to enter that at time. Holiday's still going to be good for a few more years. Things are looking great right now.
And throwing Lonnie Walker in for 1 year, I mean, it does not hurt, let me tell you. Great bench piece.
And we'll have Al Horford for the playoffs this coming year, hopefully. Amazing second season for Joe Mazzulla, and I think most importantly, hopefully Brad Stevens will not be going anywhere anytime soon because he has done just an unbelievable job building a championship-level roster around the core that he helped develop as a coach. So now a transition into the opening week of the NFL, all the way back to Thursday night before, you know, the crazy Friday night game in Brazil and all of that. Thursday night, it was Chiefs, it was Ravens. There was a lot of hype going into it, and I don't think it disappointed, to be honest. It was a good game. I want to just open it up to that specific game in general, but I want to preface it with we seen the clear two best teams in the AFC going at each other on Thursday night?
I don't think that that's the case. I think there's some other teams that we can argue are just as good as the Ravens, if not better. I think the Chiefs are definitely one of the top two teams. It's kind of hard to argue against the two-time back-to-back Super Bowl champions.
They're number one, I'd say.
They're probably number one. But I think the Ravens do have some contention from some other teams, which we'll talk about later, including the Texans and Dolphins, but we'll get back to that. This game in specific, the Ravens had like 3 chances to score in the last couple seconds to take the game to OT. Yeah. Lamar missed 2 of the throws, and then Isaiah Likely, who, by the way, had a fantastic game, 111 yards and a touchdown, had a chance at his second one and just was 1 toe away from getting in for that game-time touchdown. So quite an entertaining game. Xavier Worthy for the Chiefs was the best receiver for them, I would say. Not a ton of catches, but a lot of yards, and he had an end-around touchdown as well. I think everyone in the NFL, I can speak for everybody, with Patrick Mahomes. Why?
Best receiver of all time. I mean, and they got Hollywood Brown, too. He was injured, he didn't play, but it's ridiculous. Like, when you win back-to-back Super Bowls, you don't get more weapons on offense. It's just not how it works. I understand how the Chiefs have done this. They still have Kelsey. I just want Kelsey to retire already, but he's still around. He's still playing. I'm sure he'll still be good latter half of the season. I guess going back to what Alden was talking about with Lamar Jackson, the way to beat the Chiefs is you got to be good late on. And I mean, the Ravens had opportunities to tie the game and send it into overtime, but Jack, does it worry you that, you know, one of the teams that we're rooting for to try and take down the Chiefs in the AFC this year, in the Ravens, led by Lamar Jackson, once again showed an inability to beat the Chiefs or to tie the game when it really mattered late in that game?
I personally think, and, you know, we've gone on the show and said this a lot, the Ravens, very solid team. Lamar Jackson is a generational quarterback. I mean, his skill set is something we've really never seen in this capacity. Sure, Michael Vick had unbelievable rushing ability, but something about Lamar's rushing ability is truly taken.
And he's won MVPs as well.
Exactly.
It's his ability to get out of those situations.
This team, and we've continued to argue this, and I'm going to argue again, this team is not ready for a Super Bowl. And I understand that, you know, Derrick Henry was one of the players that actually stopped them in one of their runs in the playoffs. But I will say that I just don't think this team's ready. I really don't. Even with Derrick Henry, I don't think they really have the experience. I think it's a lot of young players with a lot of raw talent. I really don't like them letting Patrick Queen go. I really did not like that. But I think that the Chiefs are just, I mean, they just got much better. I mean, you're not supposed to give a team a player faster than Tyreek Hill. Like, alone, Tyreek Hill and Kelsey was a terrible idea for the league to allow. And then Tyreek Hill goes, and somehow they managed to get someone faster than him. Faster than Tyreek Hill, who can honestly serve as a running back, too. And it's not like they don't have Isaiah Pacheco as well. And they also have Rashee Rice, who's definitely been breaking out since last year. He had an unbelievable game. I mean, this team is ridiculous. I personally think the number 2, considering Robert brought up the AFC Championship matchup, I think the number 2 is the Texans. Obviously, we'll get into that a little more later. But I really do think that I thought it was close. I do like that it was kept close. It wasn't a blowout or anything. But I think this is a very kind of expected result.
Yeah. Juju Smith-Schuster, who was their leading receiver a couple of years ago when they won the Super Bowl, they just brought him back, just basically on a free.
Dropped it, but
it's just have Juju for fun.
Yeah, and one thing I was going to say to you, Jack, going back to the Ravens for a quick minute, you said you don't think they're ready for a Super Bowl, and that begs the question: do you think they're ever going to be ready for a Super Bowl? Because Lamar is not getting any younger. He's what, 27 now? And for a quarterback,
that's still pretty young.
Well, yeah, but for a quarterback that runs like that, I mean, we've seen things with, Robert Griffin III got injured early. I mean,
that's true.
These quarterbacks don't have a great history of making it past age 30, which means if he's 27 right now, maybe you get 3 more good years of him.
I personally think that, yes, Lamar Jackson is an unbelievable rushing option, but there are certain times, certain play calls, where his receivers are just simply not getting open. His receivers are not great, and he has to run, and he's just simply not going to get many yards, and that can happen on a 3rd and long. And sure, you want him to run a lot. You don't want him to run 20 times a game. You don't want that.
16 carries, 120.
That's obviously an injury concern. I think that one of the main problems is they don't have a receiver. I mean, sure, they have Likely, who I honestly think is more of a receiver than a tight end, and he had a very solid game. I think they still need a receiver 1. I don't really like the approach they have right now.
Flowers isn't terrible.
I think Flowers is fine. I think that obviously his stats would have been a lot shinier if Lamar saw him wide open. But we obviously mentioned that already. But I do think that they need a strong receiver 1. A guy like who the Texans traded for, Stephon Diggs. I think that would have been a solid fit there. But overall, I just don't think this team is going to be Super Bowl ready, really, ever. And I kind of argued that with the Bills, and I don't think the Bills will either. I mean, maybe some galactic event happens next offseason, but I don't really see the trajectory for either of those teams to return to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and I think the last thing with the Ravens is that they focused on the wrong things over the offseason. I think Derrick Henry wasn't the guy they should have been focusing on, because they already do have... What do you mean what I mean? Like, their running options, they have Lamar Jackson already. They have, they have, what's his name? The guy who was injured last year, Keaton Mitchell. He was awesome before he got injured. I mean, that could be a breakout RB. And then they have Justice Hill on receiving downs. They have Zay Flowers. Like, I just think they should have focused on receiver rather than running back in that situation.
I disagree, because I look at their receiving options, and I think that's enough to get you far. You have Mark Andrews, a top 3 tight end in the league.
Didn't do anything.
Who is still a top 3 tight end in the league. He didn't get a lot of targets. He's, had injury. He was in a car accident not too long ago. He's been shaken up this offseason.
Then what else?
You have Isaiah Likely, who's proven he's a very good player. Zay Flowers, I mean, those are decent receiving options.
Bateman's not a wide receiver 2, realistically. He's someone who can play wide receiver 3 from the slot, maybe, but he's not a receiver 2. And then Nelson Aguilar's a receiver 3? No, they need another receiver, for sure.
Not every team is like the Texans, where they have Stephon Diggs and Tank Dell and Nico Collins, like 3 wide receiver 1s on it. Like, the Chiefs have proven, the Patriots teams have proven that you don't need these insane wide receivers to win. I think they do need to focus a little bit more on their running game. I think getting Derrick Henry was a good idea, because I agree with what you have both been saying, that the Ravens need to transition away from just let Lamar Jackson run all over the place and score 100 touchdowns and win MVP at the end of the season. I don't think that's going to win you a Super Bowl. I think what they need to do is, allow Lamar Jackson to transition a little bit into more of a pocket. I don't mean take away his ability to run, because that can so absolutely change games. But lean more heavily on Derrick. Derrick Henry's used to being in a terrible offense and getting 30 carries a game. He can still do that, even though he's old. I think they need to lean more heavily into allowing Derrick Henry to do that. Still have some designed runs for Lamar Jackson.
They didn't.
I know.
They didn't allow Derrick Henry to run. They gave him 13 carries. Lamar Jackson had more than him.
Right, so if they're going to bring in Derrick Henry and not use him, then I don't like it. But I do, on the face of it, like the idea of bringing Derrick Henry with the vision of getting him more involved and allowing Lamar Jackson to pick and choose where he dominates the game with his legs, but also pass more, because I think they have enough receiving options to make it far. I think it's down to Lamar Jackson. Can he make those plays in crunch time? And there's some more games we want to move on to, but one last thought.
I personally think that Derrick Henry's a very solid back. Sure, he brings up a lot of volume, but I really did like, obviously Dobbins faced a lot of injury issues, but I mean, this year he's now healthy. In this first game, he was elite. He really was. I personally prefer Dobbins, Gus Edwards, and a Justice Hill trio than Derrick Henry on that team, because I think there were so many running backs and there was just so many different play sets that they could have drawn. I think that could have been just as good, because even though Lamar runs a lot, he could have at least done some toss plays to the right. A lot of those very solid, screen plays. I mean, those are really, really elusive and agile backs, and I think they're going to miss them this year.
So the next day, there was a game on that Friday night, and I want to just quickly talk about, and I want to start it by saying, whoever let the Philadelphia Eagles get Saquon Barkley should be fired, because that should not have happened. I mean, similar to the Chiefs getting Worthy and Marquise Brown, the Eagles should not be allowed to have had Saquon Barkley. He had, almost over 130 all-purpose yards with three touchdowns in his first game, as the Eagles did beat Green Bay 34-29. Is this the opportunity for the Eagles to cement themselves back as a legit Super Bowl contender this year?
I don't see any reason why they wouldn't be.
Right.
I'm a little concerned with Hurts' turnovers. That's the only thing I have to say. Other than that, really, I don't see any issue. Barkley's going to be fantastic. It's a huge upgrade
If
over.
he can stay healthy, he's a top 3 running back.
Oh, easily. Yeah, easily. I think he could be the best running back in the league this year if they play him right.
He very well could.
But, yeah, I mean, Barkley was awesome. Hurts did his thing other than the turnovers. Brown had a great game. Smith was good as a wide receiver, too. This team is great. I don't think that there's any reason to say that they wouldn't be an NFC contender for the Super Bowl this year.
Yeah, there's definitely no reason to say they're not a contender. I personally really like the Lions. I understand it was a bit of a sloppy game last night. I mean, I personally think the Rams are genuinely legit at this point. I think they're back into a category where you could, consider the Rams a legit football team. They're not really that, average 9-8 team. Sure, they may finish that way, but they're not like a team that has a low ceiling. This team is solid, a playoff contender.
Yeah.
So I think that the Lions are definitely they're my pick right now for the NFC, to represent the NFC in the Super Bowl. However, obviously that's very volatile. But I do think that, giving Saquon Barkley an amazing offensive line was already a warning sign for the league. And good Lord,
He had to do it behind the Giants' offensive line before.
Exactly.
It's like now all of a sudden he gets a great offensive line, and this is what happens.
Yeah, Eagles are going to be a good team this year. A quick mention of the Packers. Unfortunately, it did seem that Jordan Love picked up an injury almost one of the very last plays of the game, so that's really, really never good.
5 seconds left.
It seems that it's not a long-term injury, which is very good news, but he might be out for about a month or so.
Very, very good news considering who their backup quarterback is, because as a Titans fan, I can tell you they are not going anywhere with Malik Willis.
Yeah, I mean, they have the potential to do good things this year, and they didn't do a whole lot in the first half of last season, and they ended up being a really, really strong team. So I don't have any doubts that the Packers will still be able to make a playoff push, but not the start to the season that they wanted. Now I want to move on to another game. Jackie mentioned them already, the Houston Texans. That is a pretty dangerous offense. Of course, additions of Stephon Diggs and Joe Mixon, who looked unbelievable in that first game. Tank Dell, of course, coming back from injury, and Nico Collins developing into a top 10 wide receiver last season. This Houston Texans team did get the win over the Colts, who do have Anthony Richardson coming back. Just any impressions about the Houston Texans? Are they going to be, legit this year?
I think so. I mean, I think they're probably going to rival the Chiefs for the best team in the AFC as of right now. Mixon was awesome. 30 carries is ridiculous, by the way, for 159 yards and a touchdown. I mean, Mixon, and also 3 receptions for 19 yards. What a pickup that was for them. I mean, you can even just see how much it hurts the Bengals, which we'll talk about in a couple minutes, to lose him. And then obviously the receiving options. there's really no way that you can throw to a bad receiver in this offense because every single one of them is probably a top 30 receiver in the NFL.
And you can't, I personally think, I'm a huge Dalton Schultz guy. I think he's also very, very solid. So he's also another option there. And I believe they drafted like Brevin Jordan. I thought he was
supposed to be. This is like his 5th year in the league.
I know he was supposed to be like some sort of prospect, but who knows? Yeah. Maybe he'll bloom or something. But I mean, just the fact that Diggs had 33 yards, but he had 2 touchdowns. It's kind of a different version of Diggs. I see more big gains in his Bills career.
Yeah,
but
that's Nico Collins'
role. The one thing
role.
I really want to point out is the fact that Anthony Richardson threw 19 passes. And he had 212 yards and 2 touchdowns.
He completed 9, and with 212 yards on 9 completions.
So yeah, sure, he's a very volatile quarterback. I mean, there's not a very high completion rate, which is definitely differs from C.J. Stroud. But 2 of those touchdowns, I mean, his only touchdowns, I believe he had a 3-yard rushing touchdown as well, were 60 yards and 54 yards. I mean, he's got a cannon of an arm. I mean,
they're off his back foot too. He's throwing them just like. Chucking them up there, and they were just dimes.
And especially the Pierce one was especially unbelievable.
That was on 2 defenders, just right over the top.
Yeah, truly interesting considering Michael Pittman really wasn't even used. I mean, Richardson hasn't really been able to unlock that part of his offense yet. JT was nothing special, but Anthony Richardson, I mean, he's also so strong in the run game. I still really like the Texans. I think the Colts really have a solid team here. Their defense is really, really solid. Their young receivers are sort of stepping up. Hopefully Adonai Mitchell will get more involved in that offense. But I still really believe in the Texans. I really do think that the Texans' defensive backs were truly terrible this game, besides one pick. I mean, it was truly just a joke to see those 2 massive plays happen. That is unacceptable.
Yeah, the Colts are a franchise that has suffered a bit recently, but they finally got their quarterback. He's back healthy. Anthony Richardson, representing the rest of the league. We all hope he can stay healthy this year, and a lot of expectations for the Colts because they've got probably the most talented team that they've had in a while. But now it is time to talk about the New England Patriots.
Oh boy.
Playing in Cincinnati, we were 7.5, 8.5 point underdogs, something like that. No team had overcome that much of a betting deficit on opening day since like 2018 or something along those lines. No one really thought we were going to win. A lot of Patriots fans thinking not going to be a good game, not going to be a good year. Most of the teams around the NFL probably thinking the same thing. We kept hearing from Patriots players and coaches, the rest of the world thinks we're going to be terrible, but they don't know what we actually do have. We knew what type of team this was going to be. They were going to try and run the ball and play good defense and manage the game and not turn the ball over. And that's exactly what we did against the Bengals, and we won.
Yeah, I mean, that was, honestly, I am shocked that this happened. As a non-Patriots fan, unbiased, I completely assumed that you guys were going to get blown out. But, I mean, I guess you can't argue with 1-0, right? Joe Burrow didn't really do anything. He just kind of threw some checkdowns all game. Didn't do anything too crazy. Jamar Chase had an okay game, 62 yards, kind of got locked up by Christian Gonzalez. The Patriots' defense was amazing in this game. To hold the Bengals' offense to 10 points, I mean, I mentioned that they lost Mixon, obviously, last year. They lost Tyler Boyd as well. So they are a little bit depleted in that factor. But really, it should not be that much of a difference. So really, just got to give the credit to the Patriots' defense here.
Really great game by Kyle Duggar. Especially amazing game, Keon White. I mean, that was his breakout game. I really hope he stays consistent. I mean, you can't really stay on a 2.5 sack pace unless you're like Nick Bosa or Myles Garrett or TJ Watt. But I mean, who knows? Juwan Bentley was also really solid. Probably our best in terms of tackling that entire game. But Ramondre Stevenson, 4 years, $36 million. I mean, sure, the running back market, the average pay per year doesn't vary too much. It's not really a massive market. I don't believe any running backs are making over 20 a year. Maybe Christian McCaffrey is. I don't know. But I feel like 9 a year was perfect for him, and his impact on this team is just immeasurable. I mean, he really was everything.
He was the entire offense.
And he aced the game. I mean, Jacoby Brissett, he didn't do anything inherently wrong. There were no turnovers. But, there's nothing really special about him.
He just kind of existed.
There's nothing that Drake May really needs to worry about in terms of, Brissett becoming, reviving his career and becoming...
Was his career ever even, alive at any point, though?
I think he was pretty solid. I mean, when Brady was suspended, he had a very solid game against the Texans.
One game.
Yeah,
Very,
one
very
game
solid.
career.
It'll stick with him.
Of course.
That one rushing touchdown was a primetime game, too, in the color rush jerseys.
I could be wrong, but did he beat us on... Maybe he didn't play for the Bills.
He played for the Colts, he played for the Browns, he played for, every team that you can ever possibly think of. Yeah.
It's not like a Ryan Fitzpatrick case, but, there's quite a bit of passing around there. But I will say I really want to see Polk get more involved in the offense in the coming weeks. But I don't really know what else to say. I mean, Brissett shouldn't get much of the spotlight. He was solid. Nothing wrong with his play. Ramondre Stevenson, probably his best game ever. I mean, this was really, based on his impact, I understand he may have had statistically better games, sure. Based on his impact in this game, I think that this was probably his most notable.
Robert, granted, you have to admit they beat the Bengals, who are considered to be playoff.
I understand statistically, sure, you can make an argument.
No, I agree
with you. This team is not expected to be anything, and they beat a team that has been brought up in Super Bowl conversations by most talk show hosts on the major networks like ESPN. I mean, I'm just saying. This was a really phenomenal game.
Joe Burrow, what is up with him? He week 1 and 2, Joe Burrow has never ever been good. Last year he threw 4 picks.
He was injured for the entire this was his first game back in almost an entire year. But yeah, absolutely. Ramondre Stevenson, we don't win the game without him. He had a massive game. I want to talk a little bit about the offensive line, because going into it, I don't know if you watched the preseason games, but I don't think you did, and you should be happy that you didn't.
I unfortunately did.
Especially the last one, our offensive line, just the amount of false start and misalignment.
It was fumbled snaps as well.
It was fumbled snaps, couldn't snap the ball, couldn't line up properly, couldn't get a playoff. It was astonishing. I'd never seen anything like it. And of course, David Andrews wasn't playing, in some of our better offensive linemen were playing, but there were issues that we had last year, and we're thinking there's going to be the same issues this year. In terms of their pass protection, I think it was maybe not as bad as we were thinking, but it wasn't good. It was pretty bad. I mean, Jacoby Brissett he didn't get sacked very much, but the amount of times where he had to just hang in the pocket, wait for an eternity for a receiver to get open, and then fire passing, absolutely clobbered by a defensive lineman. And he took so many shots, he took so many hits, which was part of his role, Brissett. I mean, he is the fall guy, but Brissett, he came in there a pretty shaky pass protection offensive line. I think they did well for Stevenson in the run protection, but Brissett, he stepped in there, and the difference in the ability to manage a game, to command a huddle, to get players aligned, to make the right throws, to make the right decisions, to not throw interceptions. I mean, Brissett versus Zappy versus Mac Jones versus Cam Newton. I mean, it's night and day, in my opinion. I think Brissett came in there, did exactly what we needed him to do, and I thought he did pretty well. So, do we think Jacoby Brissett starting for the next several games, as long as we keep playing like this, is there really any issue with that?
I mean, that's kind of what the media is saying. That's kind of what, Mayo can't give out all the hints in the world. Obviously the Patriots organization moves in the darkness. I mean, they don't really say much. They're a very mysterious team. But I will say that there's no reason for him not to play at least 3 to 4 more weeks.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I would say, at the same time, they probably don't want to disclose too much information to the public, as well as probably their quarterbacks, because they want them both to be trying their hardest to get that starting job or to maintain it. So, at that same time, I would think that they'd want that. And then also just in general, I mean, I don't think every weekend is going to be a week where you beat a team like the Bengals. I mean, I think there are definitely going to be some losses in the next couple weeks. Because that's kind of what's to be expected with this team, just because they just don't have enough firepower.
That's what's to be expected, but who knows?
I
guess who knows? Next Sunday, Seahawks at home. That's a winnable game. That was of the first 4 games, people were looking at, all right, that's one game that we have a chance to win. The other 3 are on the road. We're losing all of them. We beat the Bengals. I think we have, especially with the confidence that we'll have from this game, Brissett, I think, is going to look a bit better. We might get Polk a little bit more involved. The passing game is not going to be a lot better than this with Brissett as quarterback, but it'll get a little bit better, I think, as the team gets more comfortable. I think we have a legit shot at winning next week, but I want to talk about this Patriots season in general. I think we were betting favorites to be the worst team in the league this year.